Hey everybody, how you doing on this fine Sunday morning? Not morning. Feels like morning. Anyways, hopefully you are doing good. Have a good show for you today. Want to talk a little bit about how hard it is to trust yourself again when you're healing from a high conflict narcissistic relationship. I'll tell you that we'll get into this in a bit, but first let's jump into the normal spiel. Let me hit the right button. Welcome to Break the Cycle with DSD. I am your host, Duane. I am not a therapist, nor am I an attorney. I'm an individual much like you who has gone through a rough experience where I developed some tips and techniques to save my own sanity that I attempt to share with you to help you do the same. If you think that sounds like something that could help you, hit the subscribe button, follow the podcast, all that good stuff. Remember, only a licensed professional can diagnose somebody with a personality disorder. Absolutely learn about them, but be incredibly cautious about throwing those terms around because it puts your credibility at risk. And when you do that, people will stop looking at the patterns of behavior and just see you trying to act like a therapist. And that will ultimately hurt you. If you like what's going on here, you can support the channel by becoming a channel member. And when you do, you get special badges. We don't need no badges. Custom emojis, name listed in the credits, access to member-only events, and a member-only Discord. If you want to get notified via text message when this show goes live over on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, you can text DSDLIVE to 844-598-0012 and opt in to receive SMS text messages of when special stuff is going on. And if you want to participate in today's show, I will turn the phone lines on in a bit. And the phone number for that is 1-424-373-5483, 1-424-DSD-LIVE. If you scroll down in the description of the video, you will see a web link to call in. The other cool thing about that is I've turned on the ability, another way to leave voicemail messages, so you can also do that via there. While we're talking about that, let me just jump over here. No, not there. Let me jump over here. If you go to the website, dadsurvivingdivorce.com, excuse me, and you'll get the, of course, sign up for the newsletter. Opt in for the email. Anyways, on the right side of the screen, you'll see send voicemail. So there is another way, and there's also a way to do it right here. It'll open up a little web interface and allow you to send me a voice note. My hope for that had always been to use that as a source to be able to pull content as a question. Typically, I get really personal stuff on that, so I haven't really done that. But if you want a question answered and you don't know if you would be able to make it to a live show, then that is another way where you could do it, and I could play your voice on the show. Anyways, so let's see. We got a few people in here already, which is great, especially whenever I don't announce this. I guess I should. I was going to wait till later to do this, but I think I'll just mention this now. Obviously, the morning show thing did not work out well for me. It nearly wiped me out that first week. So I'm going to have to rethink it. I think what I will attempt to do is do a show maybe once a week and then make that the podcast for the week. Anyways, it'll be evolving. I'm trying to find a battle rhythm that works for me, that'll be helpful, because I just really enjoy doing all this stuff and I miss hanging out with you guys. Got a handful of people on here. We got Kevin on and Nevin. That is a cool name. I like that. Sharon, Heidi, Keith is commenting. Debby, moderator Debby is on. Tim is on. Nevin, I got it. You don't have to be a therapist to know someone's an a-hole. Exactly. You know, what's funny though, is we have such a hard time recognizing that simple truth, which actually let me get over here. I don't have my lights on, so you'll notice if you're watching the video that as I switch things, I got something on my shirt. It will change the lighting on my face. I don't know. I might have to change that. Let me know in the comments if you're watching the video and you're not just listening to the podcast, if the lighting is distracting or worrisome. Okay, so I want to jump into a comment that I received 12 hours ago, actually, from Holman. And I'm going to try something here. Oh, that was the wrong screen. Let me click over here. Wow, I'm just batting 1,000. Anyways, I'm trying to do something to where it make it easier for me to read. There we go. There we go. Okay, it says, not too long ago, this video was my scenario put into words in such a way that I finally understand. Now, this is a comment off a really old video from the early days of the channel, from my video, Five Traits of a Covert Narcissist, which YouTube, like last year, decided it was too controversial and said they won't promote it anymore, which is just an interesting experience. Anyways, but I'm glad to see that it is still helping people. That's the main point. Now, I want to know when and how to get past 21 years of buying into that what I had was really, let me try that again. What I had was real, was not. And I absolutely, this is like when I saw this comment, I mean, this spoke to me because I can absolutely relate to this. I don't feel as though I can trust myself enough to identify a true friend or partner. This was the biggest con job, and I bought it. Now, Holman, what I will tell you, buddy, and anyone else going through this, that is incredibly common. When I went through this scenario myself, I felt like I had lost my mind. I felt that my picker was completely wrong. And I actually remember talking to a couple of trusted friends where I said that I was so, what's the word I'm looking for? I was so not trusting myself that I was going to defer pretty much all decision makings to other people, to these core, like one or two people that I really, really trusted, because I did not understand how I got in this scenario, how I was duped for over 2 decades, very similar scenario to what Holman is talking about. And I just didn't know what end was up. And the other problem, the other reality of this is it also felt kind of like what he's talking about. I guess I can pull that back up on the screen. What he was talking about is the fact that, excuse me, it just, you feel like your trust is gone. You just feel like there's no way that this is ever going to get better. You've been so hurt and damaged that you will never recover from it. And that is an absolute real feeling. It's something that a lot of people go through. And the key on this, and the key point to remember, is it takes time. It takes time to allow yourself to heal, to allow yourself to grieve the immediacy of whatever the trauma is that's going on right now. Because the other interesting part about this, as we all know, is this typically doesn't present itself as in like you've been married for 21 years and one day it's like, hey, the relationship's over. I went left, you went right, let's just move on. It always includes typically smear campaigns and flying monkeys and all of the little interesting torment that comes with the destruction of one of these high conflict toxic relationships. And the key thing to remember is you may not even realize that it was that. You know, you may think that it wasn't that bad. And what's happening right now just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You feel like, you just feel like you're living in the twilight zone. So here's the thing, and this is what I want to say to this guy. Let me get back over here. Well, I'll start with it. And I know I talk about this a lot, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring this back up. When you're starting out on this, or if you find yourself struggling with this, maybe you're not in the super early stages of this. Maybe you've been going through it, but you're still in that mode. And to be perfectly honest, at the 2.5 year mark, I was still in this mode. I was still having a lot of problems. This playlist right here off my main YouTube page. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're like, hey, what are they talking about? Search for Dad Surviving Divorce or DSD on YouTube. And when you get to the main page, just scroll down to Mindset for Narcissistic Abuse Recovery. That playlist has about 40 videos, if I remember correctly, in it, and they all kind of feed off on each other. Hybrid no contact is a methodology of communicating with your ex if you still have kids. If you don't have anything tying you to that, please just go no contact. And then these other videos, Absolute Thinking for Recovery, that's where it's incredibly important that you pick a reason of why this happened in your own head that you don't share with a ton of people. And let's say that hypothetically is you're like, oh my God, I've researched a little bit of borderline personality disorder, and there's a picture of my ex right there. And then if that's the case, then you turn around and you say, okay, my ex has this. And in your mind, you're like 1000% diagnosed, it is this. And the reason that that's important to do something like that, to really have that like absolute black and white thinking, which I know we are not supposed to do at all. But in this scenario, for the recovery part of this, when you're really struggling, you have to remind yourself of what you're dealing with. And you have to remind yourself, and to go back to what Holman was saying, you know, I don't feel I can trust myself enough to identify a true friend or partner. You know, when you're in that mode, having a thing to fall back on to say, okay, like, because I used to do this when I would look at my relationship and say, well, you know, it can't be all fake. You know, there were these times where we were happy, and then I literally would have to play this mantra in my head that would say, Duane, now you know that your ex was diagnosed with XYZ, and as a result of that, those patterns of behavior fit into all of that. So it's like if I was thinking, I'd have these days where I'm like, but she made me iced tea and she hated iced tea, so she must have really cared. And I literally, when in my own mind, my inner little voice would say, she did it for manipulation. It wasn't real. It wasn't a genuine act of kindness. It was a facade or part of that patterns of behavior that these people have, that they do this and it's fake. And you need to accept that. Now, the problem with that, two parts. One, I have no idea. You know, as far as I know, X has never been diagnosed with anything. She has no problems. Perfectly fine. But that was not helping me get anywhere out of this pit of despair and making me move forward. And then black hole thinking and these other ones really help. So if you're struggling with that, I would encourage you to look at that. The other thing is, if you go to my webpage, dadsurvivingdivorce.com, I have a resource tab. If you click on that resource tab, and it loads, because every time I do this and I'm live, it generally loads. It doesn't load well. I got to reorder these things. But this book here, Rebuilding When Your Relationship Ends by Bruce Fisher and Robert Alberti, incredibly helpful for me to understand myself and some tasks to work through and to really look at what was going on in my life and where I was at. And I could actually see a lot of parallels. I'm like, oh my God, you know, that's me. I'm having that problem. And there was exercises to help you work through that. Coupled with that, I absolutely and use these hypnosis downloads, excuse me, from Uncommon Knowledge. I have the relationship pack listed, but the ones that I've specifically used: Mend Your Broken Heart, Getting Over Divorce, Let It Go, Unrequited Love. And I think one of them that I used to have may not be available anymore. But the main two for me that I listened to over and over and over and over and over and over and over again was Unrequited Love and Let It Go. Now, let me just say, well, okay, while I'm still on that, and I'll back up for a moment. And then if you're in the phase where you're maybe, let's say you're not sure, and you're like, well, am I really in a toxic relationship? I don't think I'm in. I worked on this project with Paul Colliani. He runs the Overwhelmed Brain podcast. He made this mean workbook, and it's a tool to help you if you're questioning whether you are dealing with a mean person. Where I think, if I remember correctly, that's where he got the name. It's been a while. That is another thing that can help you get some clarity on what you're dealing with. And he's got a fabulous podcast, so you absolutely should check it out. Just so you know, all of those things that I just listed, all are affiliate links. So if you happen to follow any of those links, I get a little kickback, I guess, that helps support the channel. But again, everything I put on there really helped me, and I worked on, like with the mean workbook. But this is the thing I wanted to say. Let me bounce it back up on this. This is the thing I wanted to mention about this hypnosis download stuff. Okay. And it's a double whammy. Well, what I mean by that is, prior to this, I thought therapists were witch doctor quacks. Zero value is what I thought. Had no desire to work with a therapist and thought it was a waste of time and money. Equally so, I thought hypnosis was also hocus pocus and would have no value. So, I mean, my point of this is, do not take out of this, what I'm talking about right now, that these were things that were already in my wheelhouse, already in my toolkit that I had used throughout my life to help me through things. They were not. And to be perfectly honest, I had a friend of mine, I know I've told this story before. I had a friend of mine when I was a couple years into this, and I was spiraling out of control, and I was going to therapy. And I felt as though I was not making any progress. I was effectively, coming back over here, I was effectively in this mode that the comment was about. You know, I felt like I didn't know which end was up, and I couldn't let it go, and I couldn't move forward. I was stuck. And a buddy of mine said, "Man, you got to try something different. You know, you have to, what you're doing isn't working, and you're just like stuck, and you're just in this infinite feedback loop." And he goes, maybe try hypnosis. I mean, and again, he was somebody who, as far as I know, was not somebody that would have routinely turned to that as a resource for help. And it did help. It did actually help me. It was a combination of the book, the combination of the therapy, the combination of the hypnosis files, the combination of journaling, watching at that particular time, binge watching YouTube videos. Back in the day, I used to watch back in the day, I mean, we're talking, 8-9 years ago, there wasn't a lot of resources out there. So my go-to YouTube channel back in the day was Richard Granion, if I'm saying his name right. And I would listen, I would just repeat his videos. Hell, I'd even download them, pull the audio out, put it on my phone, so I could just put it on repeat and just drill that into my head. I did that so much that my inner voice started to sound like him. My point is this: if you're stuck, you have to look for additional resources or different techniques to try to help you get your life back on track. If what you're doing right now isn't working, and that's where I was at, you have to try something new. But getting back to, so all of that still doesn't necessarily fix feeling like you can trust yourself again. What happens is as you start going through this and you start healing and you start having an understanding of what you've gone through, then you start to see things, right? Then you start to see and to realize, oh my God, I didn't have good boundaries. I did not have a strong, I don't know if will is the right word, but a strong boundary to say, no, I'm not going to, this is unacceptable and this has to change or we're going to have a serious problem. I was living in such fear at that point that I was afraid to put up a boundary because I was afraid that the relationship would end, the marriage would end, and I was afraid that this is that particular moment, that it was the best that it would ever be, and that I would regret if I stood up for myself and had a boundary, that it would sabotage, in my mind at the time, the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, again, I was exactly like Holman. I was basically wrapped up in the biggest con ever of my life. And I was unwilling to take a step away from that. It took me 2 decades to get to the point that I realized the relationship was so toxic that the risk of having a boundary and saying, no, I won't do this anymore, that I was willing to take the risk. And to be crystal clear, that was not, I didn't have somebody in rotation. I didn't have anything. And to be honest, I wanted that relationship. I wanted that 2-decade plus relationship to last forever. I wanted the ex to love me. I wanted to prove to, I want my inner child, my subconscious wanted to prove that I was worthy of having somebody really care about me. And the thing is it was such a leap of faith that it's kind of like the Raiders of the Lost Ark part of the movie where Indiana Jones has to walk across that the glass bridge, right? And something was talking about a leap of faith or whatever, and he just said, okay, I'm just going to step out. And he just, on the edge of this cliff, he steps out saying, okay, I'm going to believe that there's going to be ground underneath me. That's kind of the way I felt when I did that. I was not sure. I had no confidence that I was making the right move. There was a lot of fear associated with that. And then, to be perfectly honest, except for when I finally did it, I felt great. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, I'm actually going to be free. I'm going to be break free. I'm going to be away from this constant chaos. I'm going to have an opportunity to show my kids that there could be a different life, that it doesn't have to be this craziness all the time. And I felt like $1 million for about a week and a half until the mask completely dropped and I got a taste of what I was really dealing with. And it freaked me the hell out. And I'm sure anybody listening to this right now can probably absolutely relate to that, because otherwise you wouldn't end up here. So you have to give yourself time to work through that. I'll tell you, one of the other things, let me see if I can pull this back up. One of the other things that I noticed, and it probably kind of frustrated my therapist for a little bit, when I was reading this. I didn't know I could do that. That's cool. When I was reading this book, the one that's on the screen is Rebuilding When Your Relationship Ends. I also was consuming other content. I think I had purchased or downloaded a book about, it was a dating book. And it was talking about attraction. And it was, and it's kind of like what the rebuilding kind of talked about the same thing. And as I was reading it, it was like, it was the dating book was basically saying, and it reinforced what this was saying too, and kind of reinforced what my therapist was saying. Although I do have to say that whenever I told her this analogy, she wasn't super thrilled with it, but track with me for a moment. One of the examples I remember out of that other book was like, if you're walking down a street and you pass two, if you're a guy and you pass two women and they walk by you and they giggle and they laugh, do you think that they're laughing at you? Do they think that they found something ridiculous about you? Like in other words, do you think subconsciously that people are making fun of you? Or do you feel confident that it wasn't that, or that that they were, enamored with you or something like that? Now, I get, as I'm saying this, it sounds super narcissistic, but the reality is, and what the book was saying is like, whenever your confidence level goes up, you attract a different person. The same thing on this, on the rebuilding. Whenever you start moving up, I wish I could pull up the chapter on it where it shows the building blocks. But when you start moving up that, it's not so much that you attract better people. Ultimately you do, but the reality is, this is the way I understand it. The reality is your boundaries go up. Your BS detector is more finely tuned. Your inner voice and your subconscious is higher, lack for a better word. And as a result of it, if you see some people who are like, oh man, I don't need that crap in my life, you filter it out. When the narcissistic, toxic person comes up to you and they test and they throw out a little lure and you look at it and you're like, oh, hell no, I'm not biting. I know what that is. I can see the bait, I can see the hook. But whereas 5 or 6 years ago or whatever, maybe like what we're talking about on the top of this, the conversation on this, in the past, you wouldn't have seen it. You would have thought it was genuine. And when the boundaries were being pushed or the boundaries were being tested, you would let it slide, which then lets them get in more and more. My point is as you work on all of this, as you go through all of this stuff, you start to learn more. I guess another analogy I would look at it, when you were in kindergarten and I don't know, whatever grade they start doing at, math, could you at that level do senior level high school math or college math? No, you don't have the skill set. You're at the, you're way down in the weeds. So if, hopefully I can get Holloman to see this, but if you find that helpful, let me know. I'd like to know what you think about this. I know that this is a really hard thing to go through, and the really sad part is the people who are going through this right now. And maybe, and if you are, and if you're listening to this, my guess would be all of this stuff that I'm talking about is probably blowing your mind because nobody else understands it. Everyone else will tell you, what's your problem? You need to get over it. You need to let it go. You need to just go out and jump into a new relationship. For the love of God, do not do that. Give yourself time to heal. You need to be okay with yourself. You need to be able to build the boundaries. You need to be in a situation in your life that if someone is in your life, your peace, your sanity is more valuable than the person being in your life. What I mean is that way, when you have somebody that's pushing your boundary, you in your mind are saying, you know what? I'm okay alone. I've done it. I'm okay with it. I can go to a restaurant by myself. I can go to a coffee shop by myself. I can go to a movie by myself. I do not need someone there to make me feel comfortable or whatever. And then you can say, you know what? This behavior, I'm not putting up with. Knock it off right now or we're done, right? If you wanted to, to have a conversation about it. And then that is when you start to trust yourself again. That's when you start to realize that you can, your Spidey detector or your BS detector or your narcissist detector is finely tuned, not finally tuned, but finely tuned, and you get your life back. I would really encourage you guys on that book. Seriously, if you have not, if you don't need it, that's fine. But if you're at this stage, check this thing out. And I know it's old. Let me see if I can, let me try to pull it up in a new tab, see what it does. Will it pop up? Let me do this so I don't dox myself or something. When does it say it? I'm trying to see if I can see when it. 2016? Actually, I thought it was older than that. Anyway, so here's the, what do you call it? The Amazon link for it. So I think I got, maybe I don't remember if I got that paper, the digital book or not. But anyways. All right. Okay, so let me go through. Well, let me see. Breaking through, I'm assuming you're talking to me, says you are literally reading my mind. Man, if you're talking to me, what I'll tell you, man, is all of these things, all these scenarios, they follow the same patterns. The toxic people follow the same patterns, and we typically follow the same patterns. That's why it's easy to kind of detect what's going on, because we all respond the same way. When someone's bounces out of one of these things, the thoughts and the feelings and the struggles that we have are all very similar. So it makes it easier to see the patterns and to address them. All right, let's see. Oh, just to reiterate, am I saying that correctly? Remind everybody, if anybody wants to call into the show, I'm going to try to get back to the phone number. No, not that one. You can dial in by dialing 1-424-373-5483, 1-424-DSD-LIVE. And if you're outside of the United States, or if it's a long-distance call, you can use the web interface, which, if I remember correctly, is... Actually, let me scroll down and it'll probably tell me. It is callinstudio.com/show/DSDLIVE. I got to figure out a better way to make that, because that's not super easy to remember. So let me go through some of the comments. Oh, and the phone number is scrolling down on the screen. So if you are watching this, you can see that. Scrolling across, ticker on the bottom. Up your food game. Let me find that comment. I see that over here. Says DSD, it's called Nardar. I love that. Oh my God. DSD, the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. You know what? And that's a really great comment. Let me just pause on that for a moment, because the interesting, what he's talking about, up your food game, is saying, this is the way I look at it. This is one of the most painful, difficult experiences you will ever go through. You have a choice. You can choose to live in that pain for the rest of your life. You can choose to be angry, bitter, hurt, and not make one minuscule step forward. And that pain will stay the same. You might be able to hide it. You might be able to ignore it. You might be able to even put it in a box and pretend it didn't happen. But if you do not work on yourself, if you do not put in the effort and the work, what inevitably will happen And it's the saddest thing in the world, at least in my opinion. I mean, I know there's a lot of sad things, but typically you have a high probability that you will replicate the situation, and the universe, God, whatever you believe in, is going to give you another opportunity to feel it worse, because everyone I've ever seen who did this again, the second and third time around, were a hell of a lot worse than the first experience. And you will have another opportunity to feel that pain worse, to give you another opportunity to work through it. Please, for the love of God and country, work on yourself. Fix it. Heal the boundaries. Or not heal the boundaries. Heal yourself so that you can have healthy boundaries. Because that will change everything. And I'll tell you, everyone I've talked to who's done that, their life on the other side of this is better than they ever imagined it could be. I mean, think about that. I mean, I've been doing this channel for over 6 years now. So back in the day, I knew this, but I didn't have any data points to see other people back it up. But I've been doing this long enough now that I've worked with people, I've worked with coaching clients, I've worked with other YouTubers and content creators. Sometimes I ask this question of them on the show. I absolutely ask the question privately, and it'll always basically be the same thing. It's like, hey, this was the worst experience you ever had, right? Yeah. Well, after all this work, what do you think of your life now? And a lot of them, almost all of them, have said to me, this sounds weird, but I kind of am glad I went through this, because had this experience not happened, I would have never been forced to do the work to transform their life. So anyways, I feel like I just went on a rant. Let me look at some of the comments for the people who are on the show. Yeah. Breakthrough 101 says, I fell to my knees. The pain was so unfathomable. I will absolutely relate to that. Absolutely. It is, these experiences cause you the darkest times that you will ever experience. I'm trying to think if I wonder if this is in the, I'm trying to remember if this is, I'm gonna go back to, this is like the second page of that narcissistic abuse recovery playlist. Having bad days talks about that. Beware of the nice. That's more about whenever they are, trying to suck you back in. And I think, here, let me do it this way. I think I have some videos on dark days. Let me see if I can find that. Actually, I can leave this up on the screen. And this is a good little example. If you're on a computer in Chrome or whatever, and you go to someone's YouTube channel, there's a search thing, and you can actually search directly on their channel. And I have videos about this too, crawling out of the darkness of narcissistic abuse. This is 2 years ago. I think I have one that actually talks about dark days. This is the problem whenever you have over 1,000 videos trying to find old topics. However, I will say this, is if there's certain things you're looking for and you want to see if I've covered it, just go to the channel and do a search directly on that. Let me go back to there. So it looks like moderator Debbie has highlighted comments. Okay, I don't see any questions though. Oh, I do like this one. Well, not like. Like's not the right word, but yeah, here we go. Nevin said, I kept lowering my standards until I realized I was going the wrong direction. Huge waste of time and energy. And I've seen so many people do that. They'll meet somebody and they'll get sucked into the love bombing, and it's the greatest thing ever, the greatest relationship ever. Then 3 months later, it's blown apart at the seams. And then they'll disappear, and then they'll come back, and it'll be a period of time to where they wave off of relationships, and then, a few months later, they're in another relationship, and it's just this vicious cycle that just keeps going and going and going. So let's see if there's any. If you guys want to get my attention on the live stream, just do @DSD, put question in there so I know you're directing it at me, and I will attempt to cover it. We got a little bit more time on the show. There was another comment, or another video comment that I think I'll hit here in a minute. Keith says, nailed it, Nevin. Whoops, that didn't come up on the screen. Nailed it, Nevin. There are a ton of therapists I could dance circles around. Fact. 50 years of deep, in-depth healing, clearing, restoring, and related. Good for you, Kevin. Transforms your life. It absolutely does. Oh, I have my filter on, so I'm not seeing everything. So let me undo that. Scroll down to the bottom. I'm trying to scroll down to the bottom. Oh, Rebecca, that's a good one. The dark is never as bright without the darkness. That is true. If you didn't have anything to compare it to, then you wouldn't notice a difference. And I'll tell you, the crazy part about this, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this as well, like in my scenario, had the ex backed off just a little bit, I would have probably gladly gone back in. I mean, I was starting to create some boundaries. That's what set this whole thing on fire. But had she pretended just a little bit, I was willing. I didn't want the relationship to end. I didn't want to be single. I wanted the fantasy, the illusion to be real. Anyways. Oh, geez. DJH. Great comment. Says, DSD, if a person goes back to their toxic ex, please do not ever do this. They will take breadcrumbing. And here's the thing, and this is the reality. If you go back into a toxic relationship, most of the time what happens is they realize, and let me pull this off the screen so you can see me a little bit better. They realize that your threshold was here. Let me see if I can put it. Was here. If you go back, they're going to ramp it up to say, okay, well, I went from, to here, and they put up with it. Maybe they had a boundary. Maybe they said, hey, no. And then it went, and it'll just keep going higher and higher and higher until either you just completely fall apart, or finally say, no, enough is enough. Thank you so much for the super chat. Up your food game. Says, here's another way to get Duane's attention. I'm a little, I don't even know what that word is, but I know everything helps. Oh, it's a little skint? Small. Okay. All right. Thanks, man. And I'll just say I didn't realize that's what it was. I didn't read it before I put it up. However, super chats I generally do put up. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. Every little bit helps. Sharon says, breadcrumbing is the bare minimum. Don't accept it. Here, let me do this. Don't accept it. You're worth more than that. The problem is that these people are masters at breadcrumbing. And then when they sprinkle a little bit of something on you, you think it's so amazing. you gobble it up, and instead of realizing that it's crumbs, you think it's filet mignon. And I mean, and I'm not passing judgment on anybody. I'll tell you, I did the same thing. I watch my kids go through the same thing. It is really, really, really rough. So give yourself time. You know, if you're struggling with this, hopefully channels like this one or this type of content speaks to you, knows or helps you feel that you're not alone and that there's a pathway through this. Because the hardest part on this is that people do not understand. When you talk to other people, they don't get it. And they'll give you really bad advice. Bad advice? What the hell is a voice? What accent was that? Was I channeling a past life? They'll give you really crappy advice. Oh my God. The same thing happened to me. Hell, I had my kid's therapist at one point. Literally told me a couple years into this, you just need to go get laid. I'm like, what? You know, fortunately, the therapist I was working with said, you absolutely don't need to do that. You need to get yourself back on track. Really back on track. Which brings me to another little topic I want to hit. And that is the reality that you have to give yourself the time to heal from this. And you also need to look for indicators that you're not done or not finished healing. For instance, the example that I often use to describe this is if you interact with somebody, not your ex, though your ex can be part of it. If you interact with somebody and you find that you have an emotional flashback, a post-traumatic stress disordered response, although that sucks, take that as an indicator to say, I'm not quite done. I have more I need to do. I have more I need to process. I need to work through to where this doesn't affect you anymore. And what I will tell you, and this is a tough one, because early into this, or even in the middle of it, even a couple years into it, which is what I would consider the middle, you are more than likely going to still have flashbacks. You're still going to have things that'll happen that'll just get to you. One thing I'll just say that is a very unfortunate and real example of this is you might have some distance from your ex. You might have been able to put them out of your mind and start feeling like you're pulling your life back up. And then you have an interaction. You have to go to a school function, or you run into the person out in the real world, IRL, and you find yourself having all these emotions that you haven't processed creep back up because you put them in a box and you didn't deal with them. Use that as an indicator. I did that a lot myself. I can remember early on feeling like I'd gotten everything under control, everything was okay, and the ex took her bony little finger and went boop right in my eye, and it was as if nothing had ever changed. So that was my indicator that, maybe I wasn't healed from that. But I'll tell you now, there are things that happen that I don't have the emotional response I used to. Sure, I'm like, man, this sucks. You know, it's kind of like, this is annoying. I have to deal with it. But it doesn't get to me nowhere near the way it used to. All right, let's see. No, I don't see any questions. JJ says, worst advice I got was, quote, just hang in there. Things will get better. And I, as you say that, I mean, there are times where I say, hang in there. And the problem I always had when people said that to me is my immediate thought afterwards was how? How is this going to get better? You're sitting over here giving this outstanding epiphany advice, but you haven't been through this. Your situation wasn't like this. You're not dealing with the loss on so many levels. You're not dealing with the false or the smear campaign, which generally means also false allegations. How does it get better? I remember my dad said that to me. It'll get better. Things have got to be, you have to like get really knocked down and then you crawl out. It's like, well, how do you crawl out? Well, you just do. And it's like, what? But the reality is if you do the work, if you hang in there and do the work, things do get better. For instance, an example. When I was going through my situation and I had 3 young kids under the dole and I finally got 50-50 custody and I was paying an exorbitant amount of money, paying for 2 houses and I was basically paying for everything. I was circling the toilet bowl. And I remember thinking, my life is everything I've worked for is ruined. The family I was hoped for is ruined. The ability to take care of my kids is ruined. My retirement is ruined. Everything is ruined. And when people would say, just, it gets better, I'm like, I'll say it that, well, you know what? This show's been going on for a while, so maybe YouTube won't harpoon me. How the fuck does it get better? How does it get better? I've lost everything. I'm knocked back down to when I was, the life I had in my early 20s, and now I'm in my late 40s. How the F does this get better? And that's the way I was thinking. And every day I was angry. Every day I was mad. Every day I was second guessing everything. Every day was a spiral of poo. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is what I'll tell you. As I put in the work, as I re-baselined my life, as I implemented these techniques that I was making up on the go, the hybrid no contact, the absolute thinking, the black hole thinking, this thing of realizing I was in love with the illusion, the struggling with wanting to reach out to the ex, not getting sucked back in, all of those things. As I put in the work, I was doing intense, well, I don't know if intense is the correct word. I was doing weekly therapy with my therapist. I literally at one point was thinking, oh my God, do I need to be committed because I am losing my freaking mind? And as I started to work on this, as I did that, as I was reading, Divorce Poison, as I was reading Rebuilding When Your Relationship Ends, as I implemented the hypnosis, as I did all of that stuff, my life started to change. And what the crazy part about this is I did not reach the point to where I was feeling better after the kids were off of family support, after the support numbers changed, after I can't even think. I mean, the reality is all of those things that were a problem are still there. Retirement's still gone. I mean, money is not exactly great. I can look at, Debbie knows this. If you guys don't know, Debbie's my girlfriend. She's also a moderator. We talk about this a lot, looking at houses, and I'm like, just a little bit far enough. And there's a piece I don't get mad at it. I don't get like, super angry at the ex, but I look at it and go, damn it. It's like, had this not happened, I would have been able to buy a house. But I can't. And the numbers keep going up and up and up, faster than I can recover from anything. And the point is this, is that after putting in that work, let me see if I can find that comment that I had. It's been scrolling, so I may have lost it. But as I put in the work, I started to find my peace. And I made my peace with it. And I didn't get angry anymore. And I didn't, I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I can sit here and I can look at my situation and get angry that the ex did this to me and did this to us, the kids and everything. And I left, right? I mean, so don't, it's not like I was living the fantasy and she kicked me out. And, and I know that's typical. But I mean, I'm the one that said, okay, I can't live like this anymore. And my life is still better than it was in that nightmare. And it's one of those things that you can't really explain to somebody. But there is, by doing it, it changes everything. Anyways, hopefully that makes sense. Rebecca says, DSD, mine literally convinced me to get committed, which I absolutely can see them doing, and lost it. They let me out. See, they convince you that you're going nuts. They convince you that you're the problem. Mine, I did. I mean, God, guys, I can remember thinking, oh, I'm such a horrible person. I'm so lucky that I have this beautiful little butterfly. I'd have nothing if it wasn't for her, and not realizing that I was slowly being, I don't know, grilled. I don't know what the right word is, but I mean, I was slowly being destroyed. Nevin says, I still ignore people when they straight up tell me they're red flags, but I just walk away now. And that's a great point, Nevin, and I'm glad you brought that up, is, guys, these people tell us who they are. I guarantee you, at some point early on, they will tell you, if when I take this mask off, I'm a demon. And it'll be like, wow. And they do. They absolutely do. But they say it in such a way that you're like, no, you're just being hard on yourself. But, like Nevin's just said, once you realize this, you don't sit there and fight with them. You absolutely don't make excuses. And you just walk on by. You're like, yeah, you have fun. You have fun with that, and have a nice day. Breakthrough 101 says, DSD, I still can't figure out who discarded who. After I noticed him putting on the self, I went radio silent on every level. Okay, great point. I haven't had this comment come up in a long time. Here's the reality. There's two different things. Discarded someone means something, and going no contact means something completely different. Discarding somebody, you're doing it to punish them and to make them feel bad with the intent of trying to evoke a reaction. However, when you put up a boundary and go no contact, people can say, sometimes they get it confused with discarded, but it's not, well, unless you did it to punish the person. So it's all about the intent. So if you are not talking to somebody and you set up a boundary and you're gone no contact, that's not the same as a silent treatment, and that's not the same as discarded. It's all about the intent of why you do it. And so let me be crystal clear. When you do something to protect your sanity and to try to get peace in your life, and that is the reason why you're doing it, that's a healthy decision. However, if you are doing it to try to punish the person, like, I'm not going to talk to them. They've made me mad. They've hurt my feelings, and I am going to intentionally disregard any text, phone call, any attempt at communication because I want them to pay. Completely different intent. Now, I can understand that probably a lot of people will do that in some level. And again, that is one of those things where you're kind of, when you're doing that and you're like in a lower vibration, I don't even really understand that, but I think people say that a lot. If you're in that lower state, then maybe that might feel like an appropriate thing. But as you start maturing and growing, you'll realize that just adds more chaos and jeopardizes your personal peace, and you'll realize it's not worth it, and you won't do it. You won't be doing it for that reason. So let me look at some more of the comments. Gamer Christina says, DSD, will I ever find a second date? Whenever I try to explain why I don't see my child, I'm seen as a bad person. So here's the thing. There's a lot of games going on in relationships nowadays. In some ways, it probably would be good for women to watch some of that, like I'm trying to think, 33 Secrets, Coach Greg Adams, whatever. Because what's happening nowadays is people, the whole relationship game is completely different. There's a lot of players out there, and there's a lot of targets out there, and everyone has to value themselves, right? And what I mean is that, Christina, if you are finding a situation to where you're dating a lot and you're never getting a second date, I would encourage you to start working more on yourself. Don't worry about relationships. And I know there's an age thing. To be perfectly honest, women have it harder, because if you are wanting to have kids and you're wanting to have a family, every year you get older, it gets more complicated. Me and my ex-wife had children late. So we had kids in the 30s, and we weren't even thinking about the complications that we were lucky that we didn't have, except for our son, but that was more for a problem with his birth, not as a genetic thing. And I think the reality is that, see, here's the thing. And if you listen to some of those channels, like the 33 Secrets guy, which I'm sure you'll probably find completely annoying, there's a lot of good dudes out there. There are a lot of people who probably are more aware of what's going on out there, but there's still people out there that want relationships, that want marriages, they want long-term relationships, they probably want a family. And and this goes for anything in life. If you are doing something and you're seeing a trend, you have to do something different. For instance, when I was talking about myself earlier in this thing, when I was noticing that nothing was working to help me emotionally move forward, I had to try something different. If you're a person who's sitting there dating and all the relationships are going the same way, you have to try something different. And you have to be okay with it. And what I will tell you, and this is blowing my mind, I've seen this happen, and I learned this way early in my life. And I used to tell people this even before I was going through this scenario I'm going through. And that is, as soon as you get to the point that you're not freaked out about relationships, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be, you're in that fear mode. You're like, I'll never find anybody. And I'll roll this back into a story here in a minute. Every person who I've said this to, like, look, you got to get to the point where you're okay with yourself and you're not looking, you're not desperate, and you're having fun. And every time that happens, the person shows up. Okay. Story time. God, I can't remember how long, back whenever Debbie and I met. Before we met, or the period of time before that, I went through a phase where I'm like, oh my God, I got to find somebody. I need to prove to the world that I'm still worthy of love. And I couldn't find anybody. The dating sites, nobody would respond to me. It's like I couldn't make any progress anywhere. Maybe when I was out in the real world, there was a couple of not opportunities, but there was a couple of interactions where it was like, oh, wow, there was some chemistry there. But because of the money, I didn't have the money to drive into town. I didn't have the money to do jack shit. I couldn't go on a date. I couldn't take somebody to coffee. I didn't have enough gas to drive someplace, and I lived out in the middle of nowhere. Then I finally made my peace with it. I went through all that stuff I was telling about. Rolling the clock back, talking about when I was doing the therapy, So when I was at that point where I was doing that weekly therapy, and then things started getting better, and working with the therapist was like, hey, you know what? I don't think I need to come next week. I'll come the week after next. And then it was like, well, let's take a 2-week break. Let's do a 3-week break, and then we'll do it. Then it was like, for a while there, we were doing these once a month things. And then finally it was like, the therapist is like, we've kind of worked on everything, there's really no reason, you're good, at least at that, I won't say at least at that stage, but, and things got better. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, you know what? I wasn't doing the online thing anymore. I had the accounts. And the funny story, so for you guys who have stuck it out for an hour into this conversation, Debbie, how long has it been? I can't pull up my thing. I get screwed up on the thing. I think we've been together 9 years, 8 years. I can't remember. I think the kids are in the house. It's like a Saturday morning. And what I had done at that point, where I was at that stage in my life, is I was not looking on the dating profiles like Match.com. And if somebody looked, I'd get a notification. And what had happened is 2 weeks before I got a notification. So this is how this started. So a couple of weeks before all this, the main story happens, I get a bling. Actually, I get a text. And it's like, hey, baby, why are you on Plenty of Fish? And it was somebody from work. And I'm like, oh, no. And I'm like, searching for my future ex-wife to buy a house for, right? Something sarcastic like that. And I immediately deleted that account. And I'm like, oh, I forgot it was there. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just purge all this stuff. I'm just done with it. I don't need it. I'd gotten to the point where I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm liking my life. I still had 3 kids under child support. I was still paying a ton of money, but I was like, you know what? Life is getting better. Things are okay since 2014. So that would be 8 years. Okay. Almost. Am I doing the math right? So this whole thing happened like end of December, the part I'm telling. So I go through this thing, and this is what happens. I think it was the 10th. I'm trying to remember because I can't remember whether we count the date on that Sunday we started talking or what. But whatever. So, anyways, I get the thing from Match. Somebody looked at your profile, and I'm like, oh, okay. And the way I would do this, since no one looked at my profile much, if someone did, I would just go and I would say, okay, because it would say somebody age 43 or whatever it was has looked at your profile. I'm like, all right. So I'd go and I'd say, okay, give me a search of everybody that's aged 43 in this area and give me a list. And the list pops up. And the last person that had been on Match.com that looked at my profile was my ex-wife. And Match said, we had a 92% match. We were perfect for each other. And I was like, oh, you've got to be effing kidding me. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to delete this. And then a few hours later, I get ding. Let's see, what is it? It's an X years old person looked at you from the town that she lives in. And I'm like, huh. So I looked at it and I'm like, I did the same thing. I did the search and I was like, oh, wow, there's only one person that's been online in the last 12 hours. So it had to be this person. Looked at the profile and I'm like, wow, I really like this person. We actually met up the next day and pretty much we have talked almost every day, been together. I mean, we don't live together, but ever since then, and then I promptly deleted Match.com. So it's kind of funny because I tell, I don't like online dating, but technically that's how Debbie and I met. So what do you guys think of that story? Oh, wow. A lot of people tuned off. My numbers went down. So maybe not everybody's interested in that story. Anyways, hopefully that was fun. All right. Let me see if Gamer Christina said anything when I was saying that. I hope that was helpful, what I was talking about. The only other thing I will just throw up there that's kind of rough for women is there is that if a guy doesn't have custody, it's easy to play it out and say, oh, toxic ex, won't let me see my kids and blah, blah, blah. And everyone just kind of believes that because that's kind of the normal scenario. But for women, it's a lot tougher. Personally, I would say, honestly, that is a conversation that you should be happening not on date one, right? And when you're talking about not getting a second date, I would not be talking. If you are going to a thing and you're talking about everything that's happened with you, then that's probably not such a good thing. I mean, I get it's part of your life and stuff like that, but I would downplay it. I just wouldn't bring it up. Don't lie. I mean, like if I don't ever want to date again. So, anyways, I wouldn't, you need to focus on the two, meeting the new person, kind of understanding who they are and going from there. If that makes any sense. Up Your Food Game says, Debbie, typical dude is not knowing the dates. Your anniversary is on his birthday. Oh, that's cool. Now I'm so bad with that. I literally put everything in my phone. That's like normally I have an app to honestly, I don't remember how long I've been divorced. I literally have to, I got the phone line up. I literally have an app on my phone that tracks it. So it tells me how long it's been because I do not remember. Hell, I could barely remember my kids' birthdays. I mean, it's one of those things where I have it in my phone so I can look it up because it's not, my brain doesn't track that type of data very well. Anyways, all right. Debbie had said, to this day, Duane still talks. To this day, Duane talks down about online dating, but both of us living in really small towns. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. See that, I'm glad she mentioned that. Let me just throw this other thing out there. I went through a phase where I was convinced that I do live in a small town and I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And everyone in this area, if you live out here, a lot of people kind of look down at people like, oh, wow, you live out there. And it makes, to me, in my mind, it was like, well, no one's going to want to date me because they're going to see me out here. I'm going to, it's going to be a red flag. There's going to be all these red flags and I'm never going to have an opportunity to meet somebody. To be perfectly honest, I am actually grateful for that because I know that had I had an opportunity early on, if I would have met somebody that was the same but worse, I absolutely could have seen myself getting into a bad relationship. And fortunately, because of the scenario I was in, I didn't, so, and the time when the time came that Debbie and I met, I was in a much better place, but things actually did really go to crap afterwards because, like I was talking about on the beginning of the show, in the beginning, I put everything in a box. The ex was leaving me alone. I thought my life was getting back on track. I met this great person, Debbie, who respected boundaries, who treated me well, To be honest, that almost ruined the relationship, because when I really started seeing that, coupled with the fact that as soon as the ex found out that I was moving on, she started calling Department of Child Support Services and screwing with the kids and just ramping everything up. All those repressed emotions came crashing back, and it was really tough. And it nearly destroyed the relationship that I have with Debbie. And it was not fun. I mean, that's probably one of my regrets about, I wish Debbie and I would have met after I had healed from all of this stuff, so that the trauma and the drama that we went through, I mean, we still would have went through some, because the toxic people never stop. And, but it would have immediately gone to using the kids as a triangulation thing. And if we were at a better, if both of us, Debbie and I, were farther along on all this stuff, we would have been able to deal with that a lot easier, if that makes any sense. I have whole videos about how to deal with that type of stuff. All right, let me see. Tim says, a one-horse town with two butchers fighting over the horse. Pretty much. Literally, I think the town, when I first was here, was like 10,000 people. It's not a, I mean, and there's no, I think there was one bar. I don't drink. Maybe two bars, because I think there's a VFW. But I mean, there's no ways to socialize. There's nothing going on here. There's no coffee shop. It was just, there wasn't really a good opportunity to meet people. I guess if I was, we do have a lot of churches, but I have had really bad experiences with churches, so I was not interested in that. That's funny. Let's see. I love this. DJH says, most times I don't get a first date because I come out as a record collector first. You actually collect vinyl, DJH? Oh, DJH Record Hound. Okay, makes sense. God, I don't even have it. I wonder if I do. No, the ex got all the vinyl. I do not have any records. All right. Well, guys, I think we'll wrap this up. I hope that this conversation was helpful and valuable for you. I know that a lot of people struggle with this. It's one of those things that I need to have in the rotation on a reoccurring basis, just because it's something that there's always new people coming in who are struggling with this. So anyways, on that, let's do this. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this show, this podcast. You can find out more by going to dadsurvivingdivorce.com or looking for Dad Surviving Divorce on YouTube. Or if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to see the podcast, search for Break the Cycle with DSD. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to all of the people who help keep the lights on by becoming a channel member and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it, and every little bit helps. So on that, guys, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you on the next one.